The morning of Easter Monday brought with it a silence that quickly turned into a tidal wave of emotion as news spread from the heart of Vatican City that Pope Francis had passed away at the age of 88. Just a day earlier, the world had seen him alive, fragile yes, but present at the Easter Sunday celebrations in St. Peter's Square. With countless believers looking on, he had offered his blessings and greeted the faithful with a warmth that belied his weakening frame. And yet, in the span of a single night, the Catholic Church lost its shepherd. It was Cardinal Frel who solemnly conveyed the message that the Holy Father had returned to his eternal home, to the presence of the Heavenly Father he had served with such devotion. In the hours that followed, millions began to reflect not only on the Pope's sudden departure, but also on the life and legacy of a man who had forever altered the image of the papacy. Today, we take a deeper look into his final moments, the rituals that follow the death of a pope, and how Pope Francis, always one to place humility before grandeur, had quietly reshaped these ancient traditions with his signature simplicity. It's still hard to fathom how quickly everything changed. Just the day before, the world witnessed him, not standing but seated in his wheelchair, waving with a gentle smile to the ocean of people who had gathered in the square to celebrate the resurrection of Christ. Though his body appeared frail and his movements slower than ever, his spirit had not waned. He was wheeled around the square with care, stopping often to touch and bless the infants brought to him by tearful parents who saw the moment as something sacred. His voice, though no longer strong enough to proclaim the Easter message himself, was echoed through the voice of an aide. That message focused not on doctrine or politics, but on a plea for humanity. He called for peace in regions torn by violence, including Gaza and Ukraine, and denounced the senseless craving for destruction that continues to scar the human story. It would be the last time the world would hear from him. Only a few hours after that poignant appearance, at precisely 7:35 in the morning on Easter Monday, the Vatican confirmed that Pope Francis had passed away peacefully. His final breath was drawn in the city he had led with mercy and courage. His health had been slowly declining, especially after a hospital stay earlier that year due to severe pneumonia affecting both lungs. The illness had taken a toll on his body, made even more severe due to a childhood surgery in Argentina during which part of his lung was removed. Still, despite these mounting health concerns, the Pope's sudden departure came as a shock to many. Eyewitness accounts from that morning describe a surreal scene. BBC reporter David Jaglani recalled how the moment the Vatican announcement reached the public, crowds began to surge towards St. Peter's Square. Some ran in disbelief. Others stood still in tears, and for many, it felt as though time had stopped. In the streets of Rome, a city that had grown used to his presence, grief was thick in the air. The man, once known as Jorge Mario Bergoglio, had walked a long and unpredictable path before arriving at the gates of the Vatican and eventually at the gates of heaven. Born in Buenos Aires to Italian immigrants who had escaped fascist persecution, young Jorge's early life was far removed from any vision of priesthood. He worked jobs that seemed ordinary. He served as a nightclub bouncer and spent time as a chemical technician before he felt the unmistakable tug of a higher calling that led him to the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, where he began a journey of faith and discipline that would eventually place him at the helm of one of the world's oldest institutions. When he was elected pope in 2013, history was made. He became the first pontiff in over a millennium not to hail from Europe, the first pope from the Americas, and the very first Jesuit to sit upon the throne of St. Peter. His papacy, lasting 11 remarkable years, was marked by a radical departure from tradition, not in faith, but in form. From the very beginning, he made it clear that the role of the pope was not to be cloaked in luxury. He declined the lavish papal apartments, opting instead for a modest room in the Vatican guest house. He traveled light, lived simply, and constantly reminded the world that leadership in the church was about service, not privilege. He washed the feet of prisoners, embraced individuals with severe deformities, and made it his mission to speak for those who had been pushed to the margins of society, the poor, the refugee, the overlooked, and the forgotten. In what would become his last official message to the world, Pope Francis continued this theme of selfless concern for others. He called upon world leaders to protect fundamental freedoms, religious, intellectual, and personal, and implored them to seek lasting peace where conflict still reigned. His voice, though conveyed through another, carried the same passion and fire it always had. He reminded the global community of the responsibility to aid those facing starvation, to uphold human dignity, and to never lose sight of the fragile hope that binds all people together. Historically, the initial confirmation of a pope's passing involves the Camerlengo, a senior Vatican official tasked with verifying the death. In a scene both sacred and symbolic, the Camerlengo approaches the pope and calls out his baptismal name 3 times. If there is no reply, the tradition holds that the pope has truly departed from this world, and the official then announces it to the church. What follows is the ceremonial destruction of the fisherman's ring, a distinctive symbol of papal authority. The ring is crushed, marking the official end of the Pope's ability to govern the Church, preventing its misuse, and signaling the closure of his earthly mission. The rituals that ensue usually unfold with stately grandeur. Within 24 hours, the late Pope's body is customarily embalmed and placed on a raised structure known as a catafalque inside the Grand St. Peter's Basilica. Here, thousands of faithful are given the opportunity to pass by, pray, and pay their final respects. In burial, 3 nested coffins are used. First, one of cypress wood to reflect simplicity, then a lead coffin representing durability and finality, and lastly, an outer oak coffin symbolizing the dignity of the Church and the Pope's enduring legacy. These layers are not merely practical, but speak to the sacredness of the position held by the Holy Father. But in characteristic fashion, Pope Francis reimagined these long-standing customs to better reflect the principles he held close throughout his life. He had already approved simpler funeral plans well before his death. Instead of the triple coffin tradition, he requested a single wooden casket lined with zinc, modest yet dignified. Furthermore, he declined to have his body displayed in the traditional manner upon the catafalque. Rather than being set out for public viewing, he preferred a more intimate setting, asking instead to remain within his coffin with the lid open for visitors to quietly offer their prayers and farewells. Perhaps the most striking departure from centuries of precedent was his final resting place. For over 100 years, popes have been interred within the crypt of St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican Grotto, surrounded by the remains of past pontiffs beneath the heart of Catholicism. But Pope Francis chose a different destination. He expressed his desire to be buried at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, one of the 4 major basilicas of Rome, and a church he held close to his heart. This decision spoke volumes. It was more than personal preference. It was a theological and pastoral statement. His burial site, located in a more accessible part of the city, will be open to ordinary people. It reflects his lifelong emphasis on being a pope among the people, even in death. St. Mary Major, located in the very heart of Rome, is a place where pilgrims, tourists, and locals alike can stop to offer a prayer or light a candle. Unlike the more secluded grotto of the Vatican, this basilica stands among the people, among the living streets of the Eternal City. In choosing this sacred space, Pope Francis ensured that his memory would remain close to those he loved the most, the forgotten, the overlooked, the poor, and those seeking hope. As word of his passing traveled across continents, the outpouring of tributes and reflections was immediate and profound. Leaders from all corners of the globe, regardless of religious or political affiliations, paused to remember the impact of this extraordinary man. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, spoke of how Pope Francis had moved millions beyond the boundaries of any single faith tradition with his compassion, simplicity, and deep concern for the least among us. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni called him a personal friend and recalled how he had often called upon humanity to summon the strength needed to change its course, urging all of us to choose kindness over division, peace over conflict. In the United States, Vice President J.D. Vance expressed heartfelt condolences, recalling his recent meeting with the Pope just hours before his death. He spoke of the millions of Christians now mourning a spiritual father they deeply admired. From across the Atlantic, Archbishop Stephen Cottrell of York offered a deeply human remembrance, describing Francis not only as a holy servant of God, but also as someone vibrant and full of life, funny, genuine, and refreshingly approachable. But the man who will follow Francis will inherit a task unlike any other. He will step into the shoes of a pope who redefined the modern papacy, who opened the windows of the church to let in fresh air, who spoke not only to cardinals and clergy, but to prisoners, migrants, and children alike. Pope Francis's passing did not merely mark the end of an era. It closed a chapter of transformation and courage. His death, occurring during the sacred season of Easter and in the year of Jubilee, a time when countless pilgrims flood Rome in search of reconciliation and mercy, only deepens the emotional weight of this moment. Francis once famously said that he came from the ends of the earth. And indeed, his journey to the papacy and beyond was anything but conventional. He challenged norms, stirred conversations, and brought the teachings of Christ to those far from the pews. His legacy is not one of marble statues or golden thrones. It is a legacy written on the hearts of those he touched. As the bells of St. Peter's toll in solemn rhythm, and people around the globe light candles in his honor, the memory of Pope Francis will endure, not simply as a pope, but as a servant who called the church to build bridges, not walls, to go out into the streets, and to never forget those who live at the margins of society.